for Chapter 7, Stigmatized Property, Grow Operations, and other topical issues for the residential real estate. Um, so in this chapter, we are going to be talking about how stigma can impact the value of a residential property and differentiate between real and perceived risk, outline possible indication that a home has been used for a growing operation, and discussed appropriate clauses to include when drafting an agreement of purchase and sale, differentiate between identity fraud and value fraud, and discuss the growing problem of mortgage fraud, discuss various types of mortgage fraud, including key indicators that indicate a potential for fraud in a real estate marketplace, also detail various activities in real estate that real estate assistant can do to help detect and prevent mortgage fraud, identify and discuss compliance requirement for brokerage, brokers, salesperson regarding money laundering, outline the key steps in auction process, including the benefit of an auction from seller's perspective, and describe how home staging works and detail staging guidelines from both interior and exterior perspective, and also describe briefly recent trends in brokerage operations and the business model, including the growth and popularity of teams and the use of social media in marketing and lead generation. So let's start off with a stigmatized property. Uh, Stigma is generally defined as a mark of disgrace. For real estate purposes, the stigma is associated with potential detrimental factors that negatively affect a property given certain unfortunate events such as a murder or suicide on the property, or the purported existence of ghost. Intangible issues such as stigma are difficult to identify. Tangible problems can be alleviated or solved by direct action. Value adjustments are readily made by appraisers to adjust for physical circumstances such as a rundown property adjacent to a new house or a house abutting a busy neighborhood convenience store. However, stigma goes beyond the physical. The unsettling reality of stigma is that perception can also impact value. It is one thing to remedy the physical sign of a murder, but quite another thing to remove the ongoing perception, that is the lingering memory of an incident occurring on the property, particularly when the event has gained widespread notoriety. So again, there is a notion of a real versus perceived risk. Two primary issues that come into play is the real versus perceived risks. As an extreme example, the haunted house may have no real danger, but the perceived impact may arise when informed that the house's purchase is haunted. Some argue that the value might increase, but others would say the value has decreased. So essentially, stigma is a perceived risk based on the perception. Stigma can come in another form, but from most attention recently on the murder, suicide, and haunting. In fact, in California, real estate registrants must disclose any murder occurring on the property within the past 3 years. Stigma can rise from other perceived situations. A negative perception may surface not only because the listed property has ground contamination, but rather that nearby property has had to undergo environmental remediation. UFFI is also a good example of intermingling real and perceived risk. Impact on value. Estimating value loss due to stigma is not easy. While some buyers may be willing to entertain certain risks, the available pool of buyers is often restricted due to negative perception. Limited research suggests that stigma results in the long period of self-affected property, as well as negative impact value. Few argue that stigma does not affect value, but rather under what circumstances, by how much. Now, few of the remedies, in many cases, time is the only viable remedy. As the stigma disappears from recent memory, individuals have resorted to remodeling, changing the civic address, or demolishing the structure in an attempt to resolve the matter. Unfortunately, in some notorious cases, properties become tourist destination with all the nuisance factors associated with the celebrity status. Disclosure: the most prudent approach to stigma lies in the disclosure. The key question is: if the buyer knew about the circumstances, would he or she buy the property? In other words, from a buyer's perspective, is the stigma a material fact that will impact the buying decision? If the buyer is not given the opportunity to evaluate this information, salesperson leave themselves open to possible litigation. Grow houses. The term grow houses is commonly associated with residential property used for illegal growing of marijuana. Such activity typically involve larger residential homes, about 2,200 square feet or more, with unfinished basements that are purchased or rented. However, grow operations may have been discovered in many different types of structures. A typical residential operation involves equipment and seedling plants brought through the garage and set up in the basement, main, or the upper level. A basement can house approximately 400 plants, which reach maturity in approximately 3 months. To mature quickly, the plants require heat, water, fertilizer, and humidity. The electricity requirements, in particular, can be substantial. Operators have sophisticated methods of bypassing existing meters and tapping into hydro, gas, and water lines. Given the heat and water needed, condensation occurs that must be vented through the holes cut in the floor, ceiling, and roofs. Existing chimneys and other fluid minerals are also used. Disclosures. Salesperson have a basic choice as to whether or not to list a property that has been used as a grow house. If the salesperson elects to do so, proper disclosure should be made. As a recommended procedure, listing broker should indicate on the listing to please contact listing broker prior to showing and preparing offers on the property. Full disclosure should be made by the listing brokerage, and a list maintained of all cooperating brokerages to whom this disclosure has been made. A first suggestion is put in the warning in writing and fax it to those cooperating brokerages who are given full disclosures. Buyer representative should recommend that a proper inspection be made by the buyer. Presently beyond visible damage done and repairs that may be required. The long-term impact of excessive humidity, use of fertilizers, and application of chemicals on the structural component, damage to interior finishes, interior finishes, and indoor air quality have not been fully investigated. Potential health hazards remain a concern, and appropriate caution is needed. Now, the kind of scenarios and the clauses that would be required would be like a buyer is submitting an offer and is aware that a property has been used as a grow house in the past. Then there could be a clause like the buyer acknowledges that the use of the property and building and structure thereon may have been for the growth and manufacture of a legal substance, and acknowledges that the seller makes no representation and no warranty with respect to the state of repair of the premises, and the buyer accepts the property and the building and the structure thereon in the present state and in an as in condition. There could be a scenario where the buyer is submitting an offer and seeking confirmation that from the seller that the property has not been used for the manufacture of illegal substance during seller's occupancy. The seller represents and warrants that during the time the seller has owned the property, the use of the property and the building and structures thereon has not been for the growth and manufacture of any illegal substances, and that to the best of the seller's knowledge and belief, the use of the property and the building and structures thereon have never been for the growth of manufactured legal substance. This warranty shall survive and not merge on the completion of the transaction. House alterations. Alteration completed in the house that is indication that the wall has been put up and subsequently removed. For example, walls have been erected a few feet back from the front window with a table and a lamp set on the front portion, providing the illusion of a living room while offering privacy for the operator. Possible indication of a grow house include moisture, rusting, staining, repair and painting, service line alteration, unusual smell, and bathroom alteration. Showers and bathtubs have been altered for plant watering purpose. Home inspection. A complete home inspection will uncover problems leading to structural deficiencies, the integrity of any repair to reverse electrical wiring or seal any break in the foundation or the holes used for venting. Inspectors will look for to ensure that the wiring is safe, checking for any problems arising from the excess moisture within the structure and verifying the integrity of the vapor barrier. However, chemical contamination and health risks are outside the homeowner's expertise. Working with the prospective buyers, certain telltale signs may indicate an indication to operate a grow house. The following list is offered for general guidance only. Seeking an unfinished basement and focusing on basement during the showing, and not looking at the home would be as would be an our purchaser look. Display for particular interest in the privacy of the home. Buying sight unseen or communicated only by fax, phone, or email. Willing to pay top dollars with no question marks. Wanting immediate possession. In addition, the defendant should be wary of renters insisting on making rent payments in cash, having no known source of income yet seemingly affluent, being reluctant to allow landlords to inspect their rented premises and making arrangement away from the property to pay rent and not discuss problems. Salesperson involved with rentals as well as property managers should be aware that residential and commercial marijuana growing operations used in the past may be repeatedly used civil liability, although the potential for criminal and other legal ramifications involving real estate registrant who who list and sell a grow house are unclear. The best line of defense is always full disclosure. Police departments are part of their investigation of grow houses and will be interested in the real estate registrant involved in property that are absolutely turned into illegal grow houses. When listing a property, registrant should be considered the following if suspicion arises. Check with the local police to see if the property is a busted drug house. Disclose. Make sure to provide a home inspection condition in the offer. If asked to find a tenant, carefully consider the factors as outlined. And listing does not have to be taken in case the registrant is not comfortable. Fraud. Fraud can be best described as a deception deliberately made to secure an unfair, unlawful advantage. Takes on many forms in the Canadian marketplace. Fraud encompasses a broad spectrum ranging from telemarketing and internet scams to elaborate scheme targeting insurance companies, credit card organizations, and banking facilities. Recently, law enforcement and legislators have focused on the growth of real estate-related fraud and therefore more specifically mortgage fraud. Fraud for real estate purposes and mortgage financing is typically focused on identity and value fraud. Identity fraud. Identity fraud has proven particularly difficult to control given the ingenuity of the fraudster. Again, identity theft is the theft of personal information, which is then used to commit fraud. That is personal details taken from a credit card or business or government databases. Again, a few of the ways are like they could be also like phishing scams, where phishing with their pop-up messages, spams, or emails are used to deceive internet users into disclosing personal information, including credit card numbers, SIN numbers, and other bank account details. And there is also a value fraud where the value is artificially inflated to deceive another person, that is a misrepresentation regarding the property sale price. Value fraud involves a scheme in which the true value of the product or service is either much less than presented or has no value. For example, the telemarketing scheme, the scam artist will obtain an advance deposit from a customer and never fulfill the terms of the agreement. With insurance fraud, the fraudster will claim and receive compensation for stated loss that far exceeds the actual loss. In real estate, value fraud is most commonly associated with the selling price. Many variations exist, but essentially the fraudster artificially inflates the selling price in order to secure the loan, exceeding the value's true value, exceeding the property's true value. The fraudster pockets the difference and stop making mortgage payments and then observes the inevitable deficiency when the power of sale action is taken. A growing problem. Stakeholders in the real estate industry now realize the full impact of the fraud. Some frauds estimated as high as 600 million for 2004 for mortgage fraud alone, up from 150 million just 3 years earlier. Insiders generally acknowledge that mortgage fraud has been expanding at an alarming rate. In recent its growth seems closely linked to both buoyant Canadian real estate market and the move to e-business and electronic platforms. Barrier to mortgage financing has been reduced given heightened market competition. Mortgage fraud. Mortgage fraud has attracted excessive media attention given its given given its impact on innocent homeowners and lenders. Lending institutions, credit reporting agencies, title companies, and origination services are placing increased emphasis on systems and procedures to counter this growing mortgage fraud problem. Type of mortgage fraud. Many types of mortgage frauds are possible. Most people think of misrepresentation involving documents is in support of an application, that falsifying employment letters stating that the borrower will reside in the residence when such is not the case, and providing false personal information. These activities do not typically provide financial gain but do advance personal interest to the detriment of others. More complex financial gain schemes involve contract falsification with one or more accomplices to make the deal work, together with sequential real estate transactions and aesthetic prices involving the same property. For example, a property flip might involve a fraudster, a straw buyer, who purchases the property a fraudulent appraisal to establish a high lending value, and salesperson to facilitate the initial and the flip sales. Identify mortgage fraud. Fraud is often difficult to casually detect, but telltale clues are present. Anyone involved with real estate and a mortgage transaction must should prudently watch for key signals. Warning signs are cumulative in nature. Obviously, no new factor will indicate the fraud potential. Uh, Always, no single factor will indicate the fraud potential, but more that appears, the more vigilant uh, and 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 the more diligence is required. For example, if the persons are known to you, ask for a photo identification. Inconsistent personal details, things that just don't add up, and unusual circumstances. Be aware of out of ordinary situations. Examples include one person acting on behalf of another in real estate transaction, or a buyer not wishing to personally see the property and not having it appraised or inspected. Close inspection. Large fraud schemes typically require complicity. Circumstances that might indicate this possibility involves a lawyer acting for both parties in transactions, or salesperson repeatedly involved in a multiple representation and with a particular buyer. Activity to focus. Salesperson does majority of the business with new client and refers buyers sellers to the same lawyer or appraiser. Unusual request of fact. Many possibilities exist. The buyer wants the property removed from MLS immediately. Unusual activity. Examples include several transactions involving the same property with a short period of time period and listing or selling prices that does not make sense based on the market trends. Rising prices and profits have also lured investors into the midst of media attention on the rising real estate value over the past few years has caught the attention of those seeking to take advantage of the weak links in the transaction process. Frauds have proven difficult to control in real estate transactions. The perpetrators are creative by the time a particular scam is identified and controlled. Fraudsters have moved on to the next weak point. Successful countermeasures required combined efforts of those involved with the legal appraisal, real estate brokerage, and finance sector in concert with the law enforcement agencies. To detection and prevention. Some of the best practices, various professional organizations upgrading their systems and procedures. For example, Canada Association of Accredited Mortgage Professionals have developed origination standards. For some standards includes ensure that the mortgage application has been fully completed and do not contain inconsistencies regarding borrower's details, establish the identity of all occupants, obtaining confirmation of down payment with increased due diligence when a gift is involved, obtaining original documentation confirming employment, providing a copy of listing and of the listing and agreement along with any attachment or addenda. The Real Estate Council of Ontario, the Ontario Real Estate Association, and the Real Estate Board are all playing a role in disseminating up-to-date information on fraud issues and prevention techniques. This activity is contemplated by research reports and education courses, pamphlets, and other outline resources to increase awareness both for the listener and consumer by organizations such as Ministry of Consumer and Business Services, etc. Regulatory activity. Organizations directly responsible for regulating sectors of real estate industry have taken proactive steps. The RECO, the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, and Law Society of Upper Canada are underway with initiative to identify and implement highlighted standards to minimize fraud opportunities. Automated detection system, computer-based detection system are available for lenders, credit bureaus, and high risk for financial insurers like Gedworth Finance Canada and CMHC, and other mortgage service providers. Mortgage fraud system typically look for suspicious events and activity based on historical research. Automated flagging has proven very effective, and is and fraud software are very significant in the marketplace. Many programs alert the client concerning misused or false information. Um, RECO initiatives involve um, register action. Mortgage fraud as a criminal offence falls under RECO 2002. The Real Estate Council of Ontario does not have doesn't have the statutory authority to prosecute the registrant for a criminal activity, but rather refer the matter to the registrar. Registrant are remanded by the registrar. An authorized representative has the authority, has right under the record to fully investigate the mortgage fraud and afford access to all books of account, cash, document, bank accounts, vouchers, correspondence, and records of of the registrant being investigated. The registrar further has the right to refuse, suspend, revoke registration based on the findings of the criminal activity, subject to the right of appeal by the registrant to the license appeal tribunal. Two cases are cited in which appeals were heard by licensed appeal tribunal and following a notice of proposal by the registrar to revoke registration. In both instances, the tribunal directed the registrar to carry out the proposal and revoke the applicable registration. So it's very unlikely that the licensed appeal tribunal will go against the findings, the proposals of the registrar, which are based on on the on the investigation done for the mortgage fraud, money laundering. Money laundering comes under the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act, which is a federal statute with three primary objectives: to implement sufficient measures to detect and deter money laundering and financing of terrorist activity, and to facilitate investigation and prosecution of related offenses, respond to the threat posed by organized crimes by providing law enforcement officials with the information they need to deprive criminals of the proceeds of their criminal activity, and to help fulfill Canada's international commitment to fight multinational crimes. The Financial Track Transaction and Report Analysis Center of Canada, FinTrack, is the federal agency responsible for collection, analysis, and disclosure of information to assist in the detection, prevention, and deterrence of money laundering and financing of terrorist activities in Canada and abroad. Matters concerning identification, verification, and receipt of fund requirements under the legislation were discussed in real estate transaction earlier. Compliance overview: the Act enacted in 2001, which is a money laundering proceeds of crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing act, originally required reporting of suspicious transactions and related activities by various persons and entities, including real estate brokerage, broker, and salesperson. In 2008, compliance was significantly expanded to include identification, verification, and receipt of fund report. All real estate registrants in Ontario are subject to these reporting requirements. Suspicious transaction: all real estate brokers and salesperson have to report suspicious transaction. A suspicious transaction is a financial transaction for which there are reasonable grounds to suspect that it's related to a commission of a money laundering offense. Such offense involves concealing or converting property or proceeds of the property, knowing or believing that these are derived from the commission of an offense referred in the criminal code. A money laundering offense may also extend to properties or proceeds derived from legal activities that took place outside of Canada. Terrorist financing: terrorist financing to provide funds for terrorist activities. The sum needed to mount terrorist attacks are not always large, and associated transactions are not necessarily complex. Guidelines: a suspicious transaction can involve several factors that may seem individually insignificant, but together they can raise major suspicion. FinTrack has developed both general and specific indicators of suspicious transactions to assist persons and entities affected by the Act. If the residents are reminded that the behavior is suspicious, not the people. Some of the indicators of suspicious transactions are: client arrives at real estate closing with significant amount of cash, client purchases property in the name of a nominee, such as associate or relative, not other than the spouse. Client does not want to put his name on any document that would connect him with the property. Client inadequately explains the last minute substitution of the purchasing party's name. Client acknowledges that the purchase for the market value or above asking price, but records the low value on the documents. Client sells properties below market value with an additional amount under the table. Client pays initial deposit with a check from a third party other than the spouse or a parent. Client pays substantial down payment in cash and the balance is financed by unusual source or offshore bank. Client purchases personal use property under corporate wheel. When this type of transaction is inconsistent with the ordinary business practice of the client purchases property without inspecting it. Client purchases multiple properties in short time period and seem to have few concerns about the location, condition, and anticipated repair costs. Client pays rents or the amount of lease in advance using a large amount of cash. Client is known to have paid large remodeling or home improvement invoices with cash on a property for which property management services are provided. Terrorist property reporting: real estate brokers and sales was not required. to send terrorist property reporting to FinTrack if the property is in their possession or control, is known to be owned or controlled by on behalf of a terrorist group or terrorist organization. Large cash transactions. Individuals and corporate entities are required to report the following financial transactions since that came into effect. The three requirements by real estate brokers: sending or receiving of international electronic transfer 10,000 or more to the SWIFT network, other electronic international electronic fund transfer 10,000 or more, large cash transaction volume amount 10,000 or more. A record must be kept for every amount of cash of 10,000 or more that is received in a single transaction. If a broker or salesperson is aware of two or more cash transactions of less than 100K that were made within a 24-hour period or on behalf of the same client, this will be viewed as a single cash transaction, even if they all add up 10,000 or more and when they report to different track. ID verification. ID verification has come into effect in 2008, expanded compliance to include identifying individuals or corporation entities for every real estate transaction in which the real estate brokerage is involved. Receipt of fund. This requirement is complete the receipt of fund record, which came into effect in June 2008. This requirement must be prepared for every amount of fund that is registered and received in the course of a single real estate transaction. Detailed procedures and associated forms were discussed when addressing offer preparation and negotiation. The following 5 elements must be included in the compliance regime developed by the real estate brokerage: the appointment of a compliance officer, development of an application of written compliance policies and procedures, assessment and documentation of risk of money laundering and terrorist financing and measures to mitigate such risks, implement and documentation of an ongoing compliance training program, a documented review of effectiveness policies and procedures, training programs, and risk assessment. Risk assessment brokerage also responsible to complete a review of policies every 2 years. The CRE has a risk assessment form that assists in the process. The form is available to the members of money laundering compliance, to the members of the money laundering compliance center, and reporting or and record keeping. Real estate brokerages are required to report such suspicious transaction, large transaction, and large cash transactions that property in their possession that are owned or controlled by the terrorist group. Reports filed with FinTrack must be kept confidential as well. The collection of personal information mandated under the Act places an additional responsibility on the broker salesperson to tell you regarding private issues that because it out in the pipe draft. FinTrack also has obligations in regards to proprietary information forwarded to the organization. Brokerage must keep the following reports on record on file relating to real estate transaction: large stage, receipt of funds, suspicious transaction, individual ID, individual identification information report, corporation entity joint services report. Auctions. Auctions have been effective over the years, establishing the real value of many products and services, including the real estate. The success of an auction lies in the staging of an open, competitive environment to buy and sell. Proponents of the real estate auction frequently point to widespread use of real estate auction in Australia. The real estate auction may be very effective under the right circumstances. Real estate auction in Ontario have enjoyed success, particularly in the niche market. Auctioneer can be generally described as someone who engages in the business of selling or offering for sale by public auction goods, wares, merchandising. RER 2002 provides that auctioneers are exempted under the Act and may conduct sale of real estate property under certain circumstances. The auction process. The auctioneer points to various benefits of auction real estate, but generally emphasizes that competitive bidding environment, the removal of artificial ceilings on the asking price, and the immediate binding contract that flows from an auction. Normally, the auctioneer operates under the auction authority, that is, agreement between the seller and the auctioneer. The document sets out the condition under which the fees is earned and the rental of the agreement. In addition, the auctioneer usually prepares an auctioning plan and strategy prepared regarding advertising and promotion. The plans for showing the type of information to be contained in the bidder information package and auction location. For real estate auction, the auctioneer typically develops a preview marketing campaign listing scheduled for 2 or 3 weeks prior to the auction date. Such a buyer receive bidder registration packages at the time. The seller sets out the sets a reserve price that is unknown to the bidder, but need not be. The decision to do or not is a function of strategy, market condition, auction strategy, and the auction seller's need. Generally, three type of auction exist in this market: the absolute auction, in which is without a minimum reserve bid for the buyer. The absolute auction is without is a minimum bid for the buyer. This type of auction normally attracts the buyer's interest since sale is virtually guaranteed with no restriction or limitation on the final selling price. The minimum bid auction provides a safety net for the seller. He or she can establish the minimum acceptable sale price. Obviously, the amount of interest in real estate is many times directly related to the minimum bid price. The auction by confirmation permits the seller to reject any final high bid price. The seller, in conjunction with the auctioneer, sets a time and date for the auction. For discussion purposes, assume the minimum bid auction is being held. If the reserve price is not met at the auction, the seller would seek out other ways to market the property. For the seller might approach active bidders to see if an acceptable price could be negotiated. If the reserve price is met or exceeded, the property is sold. Home staging. Home staging can be generally described as the process of making the home attractive to the potential buyers. The goal of staging is to sell the house quickly and for the most money possible, attracting the highest amount of potential buyers. Interior rooms. Most consumers can achieve some success in home staging by following certain basic tips. Beyond that, home staging books and courses are available, like bright and airy trumps dark and dismal. Clean is the only option. Get rid of clutter. If it's broken, fix it. If it had better days, replace it. It's for the buyer, not for the seller. Clear the traffic areas. Floors are important too. Don't ignore empty spaces. Smells don't sell well. Curb appeal. Staging tend to emphasize improving the look and feel of interior rooms, but complete staging also involves exterior appearance, including landscaping, like mow the lawn, have flowers. Painting can be real plus. Of course, cleaning. Recent trend in brokerage operation involves expanding the franchise options, virtual versus brick and mortar, home-based registrants, and using teams, real estate teams ranging from husband and wife sharing duties, also coming up. Social media and live data exchange and limited service offering and not just posting. So to recap, a stigma is typically associated with a perceived risk. The key issue is whether or not a particular stigma is the material fact that would impact a buyer decision to acquire a specific property. Home home use as a grow houses may have long-term problems given the heat, water, fertilizer, and humidity required to cultivate the plants. Home inspection may uncover certain irregularities relating to the structure and mechanical plumbing and electrical systems, but not provide information about hidden mold problems or contamination. Value fraud involves schemes in which the true value of the product or service is either less than the presented or has no value. Mortgage fraud can involve sophisticated plans involving several persons and sequential transactions involving one property. Computer-based detection systems are one of the many new innovations. Registrar has the right to refuse, suspend, or revoke registration based on the findings of criminal activity. Real estate brokers and salespersons must be familiar with all the compliance requirements related to money laundering and terrorist financing. Auctioneers are not licensed at a provincial level, but typically require auctioneers are not licensed at a provincial level, but typically require a license from local municipality. Not all municipalities have such a license. Three types of auction exist: absolute, minimum bid, and auction by confirmation. Stone staging involves both interior and exterior such as landscaping. Regardless of the commission or fees-based fee structure selected, all brokerages must ensure that the level of service provided meets the minimum regulatory requirements. We're not about to go on to. With that, I think we are done. Thanks for your time.